Hi guys, this is Kim, aka Spartan Stitcher on Instagram, here with another cross-stitching video. Talk about what I did this week. It is the 3rd of February 2020. This is video number 54, and let's talk about some stitching. I did not stitch anywhere near the amount that I did last week. I think there's a balance. I went crazy last week, so I didn't get nearly as much done this week. Part of that was a physical reason, which I'll talk about in a minute. But at least I still stitched every day. I did work, hit the camera, a couple days on Macintosh Mill. I don't remember if I had this whole building filled in, but I do now. Most of this water is white, so it's hard to see. And I did some more of these rocks, some of this over here. So my January total for this one was 2,500 stitches. That is for Arcadia, for the Full Coverage Phonetics National Park Challenge, and the 20 and 20. So I will keep doing a little bit here and there on this one to try to get that park done and keep working on the 20 and 20. The other thing I did is I was working on Haunted Mansion Stretch Portraits by Good Morning Maui on Etsy. I was working on this tombstone portrait right here. I was about halfway done, and I was working on it a little bit every day, but the School of Magical Stitches and Literature had a pop-up event this weekend, and so I just went ahead and I focused on this to get that portrait done. So I did 1,000 stitches on this to finish that portrait, and her hair is a little bit difficult to see here on camera, but it is much easier to see in person. So I'm now halfway done with this piece. I do want to finish it this year, and you can see I have the third frame started. Whenever I get back to this one, I will start working on that third portrait, which is the guy standing on a bucket of dynamite. This morning and then one other evening, I worked a little bit on Supersized Color Expansion Museum Shelf. I'm down here in Dinosaur Corner, and you got the Triceratops skull. I don't know what kind of dinosaur. This is the T-Rex, obviously, so I don't know what kind of dinosaur this is, but he's got one leg coming up here and one leg coming up here on the side. I put 810 stitches on this since last week. Wish I had done more, but it's still looking pretty cool. The details are shown up in that Triceratops skull, and so he's one of the standing dinosaur. One leg's going to be here, and one leg is coming up here, kind of behind some stuff. So I will keep working on this for February. This is my Carlsbad Caverns piece for the national parks, and let's see, in January I did 2,400 plus, I don't know if some of that counts the 800 I did this week or not. So, and those are 10 stitches, so I need to do 8,000. So I still have a ways to go. You can see, again, I'm cropping out the outer gold border on this design, so the first column of pages is pretty skinny right there. So that's where my page is, but I've been taking it quite a ways into the next page. So we'll see how much I get to in this week on that one. I got Flosstube itchy nose. And it is now February, so that means the next familiar was released for the catalog of Witches Familiars Mystery Stitch Along by Ingleside Imaginarium. I really like this guy. So I've already got him done. Finished him last night. Isn't he cute? That is Lepus the hare. And hares for Witches Familiars are known to retrieve spell ingredients overnight. So he is there carrying some blue flowers to his witch for the spell that she's concocting. So I really like him. And for the February block, I did use the lighter skein of Gassed Butter Crunch. You can see it does show up in person. It's harder to see on camera, but it's not as bold and bright as the DMC equivalent used in Felis. So, but he's pretty cool. I will keep working on this this week to get the borders for the next 2 months done. That's what I want to try to get done. So, again, 32 count Lugana in Murky by Picture This Plus. I also counted the hair for the pop-up event in the School of Magical Stitches. So I had over 2,000 stitches toward the pop-up. And just today they opened up a few more areas of the parks to build, so I will count my stitches towards those. Those are the 4 that I worked on this week. For next week, so I'll work more on Museum Shelf. I have to catch up and do this week's release on the Blackwork Sal by Peppermint Purple. My piece for February for Around the World in Full Coverage Fanatics for Brazil is Friends Forever. So I don't know if I'll take that one out this week or if I'll work on Macintosh Mill. And then, of course, the familiar border. My full coverage total for 2020 or for January is 11,827 stitches. So that is more than 3,000 more than I needed for the month of January. But I'm happy for that. It's good to get ahead. Doesn't hurt anything. If something should come up in the next few months, I'm ahead of the game, and I'm just going to keep chipping away at that. For the national parks where you're trying to get 25 parks, 100,000 full cross stitches. So I'm going to need more than that. But that 11,000, excuse me, those are full cross. I already transcribed my 10 stitch pieces into full cross for that amount. So I'm 3,000 stitches ahead of the game. If you remember, last year in March, I finished Moonhair by Hade. And I said that was the last time you were ever going to see it because my friend and I started Moonhair and she started her first Hade, which was a QS, on the same day in 2017. And we just did a stitch along together. So I finished Moonhair last March. She finished QS Curl Up with a Good Book in January. And just like I sent her Moonhair, she sent me the Dragling. So I got that this week in the mail. She lives in Colorado, so wrapped around him in the mailing tube was this cool tea towel with all things Colorado, which is also cool because my brother-in-law and his wife live in Denver. So we're definitely fans of Colorado. I've only been there once though. I think I need to make more trips. Anyways, here is QS Curl Up with a Good Book by Randall Spangler. She stitched this 1/1 full cross on 22 count Ada. Just like is completely normal with people trying their first Hade. She had a few false starts as she was determining what fabric count she liked best. Full cross versus tent, 1 strand versus 2, all that good stuff. But this is 1/1 full cross on 22 count. And I just love him. I think he's really cool. I will work towards framing him. I don't know if I'll take him to the Hobby Lobby here or try to frame him myself. But that is QS Curl Up with a Good Book. And the good news is she does plan on doing more Hades. Though she does have another full coverage that she's already started from a different company. So, let's see. Do I have any more? Oh, the reason that I didn't get as much stitching done this week is I woke up Thursday. This is when you know you're old. I woke up Thursday with something wrong with my back. I thought I just slept wrong and something was out of place. And but my husband's not here to help me pop it back into place. So I tried all kinds of things, and Friday the pain was worse. It was more constant. It didn't matter how I moved my shoulder. The pain was like right underneath my shoulder blade, towards the center, but still a good distance away from my spine. So I thought it was a pinched nerve. I iced it. I took anti-inflammatories and just trying to make myself comfortable. So I didn't get as much stitching done this week. But the good news is I'm slowly getting better. It's almost back to normal. Of course, you know, no chiropractors are really open on the weekends. And I have an appointment to go see the chiropractor tomorrow morning. And now I'm almost back to normal. But I'm still going to go. I figure, you know, solo parenting, 3 months with 3 more months to go, I can get adjusted and get stuff back into place. So that's my stitching for this week. The rest of the video is going to be Air Force related. So if you're not interested in that, I will see you guys later. To piggyback on what I was talking about last week with the E-11 crash in Afghanistan, in the Taliban controlled area of Afghanistan. There were 2 crew members on board. Both did die in the crash. The good news is that special forces were able to recover their remains. So they were, I'm guessing, transported back to the U.S. so their loved ones can bury them and honor their loved ones. I did put on my Instagram stories a little bit about them. I figured I'd tell you guys too. The pilot was Lieutenant Colonel Paul Voss. He was 46 years old, originally from Guam. He was a prior enlisted guy who went through officer training school in 2001 and had 25 years of service. His co-pilot was Captain Ryan Phaneuf, who was 30 years old, originally from New Hampshire. And as I kind of alluded to, the people who actually fly the E-11s are from different career fields, different airframes. And Captain Phaneuf was a B-1 pilot stationed in Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota. I don't know if either one was married or had children, but many thoughts and prayers going to their families, and thank you for their service. I thought I would talk a little bit about the aircraft mishap investigation process. It is a bit different when you have a crash that is in a foreign country and you can't maintain control of the wreckage site. But I can talk about what we do here for aircraft mishaps. Both my husband and I received aircraft mishap training, both as maintenance officers, and then once he cross-trained to the operator aircrew side of things, he received more. So what that meant for me as a maintenance officer is I went to the Air Force Safety Center at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico for a couple of weeks, TDY, when I was stationed at Seymour Johnson. And what they have there is they have this big field where they've actually collected the wreckages from several different types of airplanes and laid them out in the exact same way that they actually crashed, to help students learn how to investigate a crash, how to determine what happened, what went wrong, find the causal part of the crash. So I think pretty sure it was 2 weeks long. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise and there's no one here in the house with me, so I'm wondering what's going on. Anyways, the first thing you need to know for aircraft mishaps, they're not all crashes. There's different classes, A, B, and C being the primary ones, and the monetary value of the aircraft damage and or personal injury determines the class of the mishap. Class C is your lowest class, so monetary damage, aircraft damage between $50,000 to $500,000, or injury to a person that makes them miss work. So, as you can imagine, doesn't take much. It could be just any maintainer doing maintenance on the flight line. Airplane doesn't have to be in the air. Something could go wrong while they're doing some maintenance that causes them to miss work. That's automatically a Class C mishap. Or dropping a part on the ground. Depending on the price of the part, Class C mishap. A Class B mishap is between $500,000 to $2 million of aircraft damage, permanent partial disability of one person, or 3 or more people were injured. So this could be towing the airplane to either in a hangar or out of a hangar or around other airplanes, and you have an aircraft collision. So this is why when you fly commercially, you see when the airplanes are taxiing into their parking spot at the terminal, you always are waiting for wing walkers who stand out there with their batons to make sure that the aircraft wings are not going to hit anything, the jetways or the age equipment, anything out there. A Class A mishap is aircraft damage of $2 million or more, destroyed aircraft, so crashed aircraft, a loss of life, or permanent disability. So, to put it into perspective, the F-15E Strike Eagle has 2 engines. If something happens to one of those engines, whether it's foughted out, damaged by a bird or hardware, or one of the fan blades just comes off and tears up the whole engine, whether it's on a maintenance run on the ground or whether it's flying and the pilot still manages to land perfectly safe because you've got another engine, that's still automatically a Class A mishap because one F-15E engine hits that $2 million mark. So doesn't necessarily have to be a disaster to be a Class A mishap. So it's either or, the cost or the injury to people, or both. So I received that training in Albuquerque, came back, and what happens in an aircraft mishap is once it happens, they want to get people who are experienced in the airframe but not in the unit in which it happened, obviously. You need some objectivity. So at Seymour, there's four fighter squadrons. 2 of them are training squadrons and 2 combat squadrons. So every aircrew member that comes through to learn how to fly or be the weapons system officer on the F-15E comes through Seymour Johnson to go through the training squadrons. They have a curriculum to go through to train on different things. And then they'll either move to one of the combat squadrons or they'll PCS, go to a different F-15E base. So all F-15E aircrew come through Seymour Johnson. So you have the 2 AMUs supporting the maintainers, supporting the training squadrons, and 2 AMUs supporting the combat squadrons. When I was in the on the flight line, I was in one of the combat squadrons, and we had a mishap occurring with an airplane in one of the training squadrons. So when that happened, they not really volunteered me. They assigned me and a pilot from one of the combat squadrons who also had some mishap training experience to look into this. It was a Class C mishap to figure out what happened. Now, let me pull up a picture to show you, describe to you what happened. This is a picture I've shown you before. It's a good visual aid. This is an F-15E flying over Afghanistan, Operation Mountain Lion. Let's see, focus on the picture. So here you have, again, these are external fuel tanks. You have bombs here. This is nav pod and target pod. These are not weapons. So bomb there, external fuel tank, and then you have air-to-air missiles and weapons pylons coming down from the wing. These are AIM-120 missiles, and then this one's an AIM-9. When we're flying this is obviously combat loaded aircraft is flying over Afghanistan. When we're flying in the States, they won't have all of this. This is air to air and air to ground. So they'll either be configured for air to air or air to ground. Now, when they're flying air to air, they may or may not have external fuel tanks, but they will have an AIM-9 on one wing and an AIM-120 on the other. And for those training sorties, again, there's no explosive material in the missile. It's just targeting. The missile does not leave the aircraft. It stays there, and they get their training done in the cockpit, targeting and maneuvering the airplane and all that. Nothing leaves the airplane. Well, in this incident, what happened is they hit the master arm switch to start their targeting practice, and this whole thing came off the airplane. It's what we call a dropped object. When something comes off or is ejected from the airplane without cause, without being, because of course they can tell, they can absolutely, push a button and have this ejected, like for combat reasons, if you think about it. But this whole thing came off the airplane. The external fuel tank, the weapons pylon, and I think it was the AIM-9 was on that side. Came off the airplane. Flying over the United States. Nobody was hurt, but aircraft damage, loss of parts, Class C mishap, plane landed just fine. So what happens at that point? The airplane is impounded. A master sergeant maintainer was the impound official, and that means aircraft goes in a hangar. Nobody is allowed to touch it without him knowing about it. So aircraft doesn't fly anymore. Nothing happens to it without this one person knowing about it. So it was me, the pilot, the master sergeant, impound official, and some weapons troops from one of the combat squadrons, because again, we don't want to investigate a mishap with the same people who were maintaining on the airplane. So aircraft is in a hangar. We look at all the maintenance records and the sortie debriefs and everything of this jet over the past month or two. Try to figure out what happened. First thing we notice is the airplane was a can jet. So again, a cannibalization jet. Instead of having 5 airplanes broke for one part each, you will have a cannibalization jet that will have parts stripped off of it to fix. So you have more operational jets and only one broke sitting for multiple parts. A can jet is only allowed to be a can jet for up to 30 days. Because then if it doesn't fly for more than 30 days, then you have to report up to higher headquarters. The higher ups are like, how come this jet isn't flying? What's going on? They want to know what the process is. So what we do on an AMU level is you have this jet sitting for about 21 days with all kinds of parts. If this aircraft over here breaks and the part says it's going to be there in a week, well, you go to your Master Sergeant Pro Super and you say, hey, can we can this part from the can jet so we can have this airplane green, meaning it's good to go, good to fly, and the part that is on order will be delivered for the can jet. So that's your daily process. But once you hit about 21 days, you need to start fixing this airplane up so it will fly before it hits day 30. And if those parts aren't in, then what you do is you pick another jet to be a can jet. And then whatever parts aren't in for this one, you take them off this one, your new can jet, you fix this one up. I know this sounds benign, like innate, I can't think of the word, asinine, but yes, you're breaking one aircraft, you're taking the exact same parts off to fix this one up because this one needs to fly before it hits 30 days. And after a jet's been a can jet and it's built back up, it does a special flight called an OCF, Operational Check Flight, where they pretty much the jet is naked. There's nothing on it. No weapons, no external fuel tanks, nothing. It's just an airplane. And they do all kinds of things to make sure everything is working like it should. And if it does, if it passes the OCF, then the training squadron or the combat squadron, whatever squadron that jet is in, can return to normal operational duties, you know, and be configured air to air, air to ground, whatever they're working on, and just go back into the regular flying schedule because you have this other can jet right now. So this aircraft had been a can jet. It had flown 12 times since being a can jet with no problems. So then the process is, okay, you look at those 12 flights. Did it have any additional ground aborts? Excuse me. Besides those 12 flights where they wanted to fly it, but in the process of starting up engines and doing all the pre-flights, something was broke and they ground aborted, meaning the air crew shut down that airplane and went to a different one. So you look at the ground aborts, you look at the sorties that it did fly. Did it come back code 1, meaning no problems? Did it come back code 2 or code 3, meaning different severities of systems broken, what was broken, what they did to fix it? And then you have this airplane in a hangar with your weapons crew, and you hook up the testers. So there's different kinds of testers where you can hook it up to the airplane and make the plane think that it is flying when it is indeed still sitting on the ground, and you try to duplicate the problem. Because if you can duplicate the problem, obviously, like, we're talking signals. We're not actually going to be dropping stuff off the airplane in a hangar. We don't actually want another weapons pylon and all that stuff to fall. But you have all these wires coming from boxes on the ground hooked up to the airplane, and if it sends the signal to eject those things, then you know you've duplicated the problem. And it took us over a week to figure out what the problem was, and it was because it was so exact you had to duplicate it in a certain way. So, you know, the aircraft had flown different kinds of sorties, been configured different ways. It had flown for a while without external fuel tanks, and then it had external fuel tanks put up for extended sorties. And come to find out, the problem was actually very simple. But again, the circumstances had to be exactly perfect to duplicate the problem. Now, if you think of plugging in like an old school cable cord into your wall in your house to get TV, in that cord you see one pin coming out, right? Well, that's one pin. That's essentially a one pin cannon plug, because it goes like this and it screws on. It's not just a regular electrical cord that just plugs straight in. It goes like this and it screws on. You put it straight on. Well, the aircraft, all aircraft are full of cannon plugs. All these wires coming from the cockpit, telling different parts on the airplane to do different things. A cannon plug could have anywhere from 2 or 3 pins to 50. Okay, so you picture something round with all these pins sticking out. And so the plug has to go in straight, and then it screws on tight. What happens if one of those pins goes wonky and touches another pin and doesn't plug in the way it should? That's what happened in this case. And it would only duplicate with external fuel tanks, with the AIM-9 on that side of the weapons pylon. Not on the other side. It had to be on this side. And then once you hit the master arm switch, because those pins weren't making contact the way they should, it fired the carts to eject the pylon. The fix was really easy. Take off that cannon plug so you have just the bare wires, rewire a new cannon plug from our electrical engineering folks did that. Plug it back in, run your tests, and it was fine. The problem was narrowing it down to find that cause. So that is an example of an aircraft mishap, the Class C that I worked on. In the case of the E11, hasn't been released anywhere, but because of my husband's job and where he's at, I know that not only did they recover the personnel, the remains of the crew, but they also recovered the cockpit voice recorder, and they took fluid samples from different fluids on the aircraft. You can Google E11 crash and see actual pictures taken from the Taliban and posted on the internet of the wreckage. So I was able to see it, and I thought, with my experience, wreckage looks a little odd. The way that it landed looks pretty whole, but then it's been burned. And then I found out from my husband that those samples and parts were recovered because there was a guy hand carrying them back to the United States. So just a guess, completely, I have no information to back this up. My guess is maybe that fire was set after the remains and those parts and samples were recovered, because I wouldn't want to leave a mostly intact aircraft, in no matter what kind of aircraft it is, in enemy territory. So that's just pure guess on my part. When you get a Class A mishap, those, especially a crash with a loss of life, those investigations will take a minimum of 30 days. And oftentimes a whole lot more than that. But pretty much it's 30 days before anyone expects any information from the investigation team. They can ask for extensions. So, of course, safety investigation results are not always put public to, or not always made public to everyone. But there is there is a system where safety folks can access that information, which I was able to do even after I left Seymour Johnson. I was able to access the safety system, and I used that information to brief and educate the maintainers that I oversaw, that I led, as training, as education on just trying to keep up your situational awareness to try to prevent more mishaps. And I can talk about that more later. But I'm running out of time, so everyone have a good stitching week, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.